wow, what an incredible place this is, what a place. It was just the atmosphere of heaven. It wasn't diamonds and gold, it was the atmosphere and the colours and the freedom and the love. It was just beautiful. So yeah, I saw these children, I saw flowers and rolling hills, and I looked up at the sky, how blue it was, and then I saw what I thought was the sun, but soon enough it started travelling towards me. And when I realised it was travelling towards me, I saw that it had a white centre and it had a halo around it, but it was mercurial in a plasma way. I know it sounds difficult, but yeah, it was not any kind of material or light that we see here. It was at once solid but not solid. It's difficult to explain. So yeah, I saw this light and it came very close to me, and out of this light stepped a man in a robe, a white robe with long hair. And I was just, in awe as soon as I saw him. It's not, you don't have to think, who is this? You just know as soon as as soon as I saw him within myself, I just thought, is that Jesus? He's really real. He's really real. And when I said that in myself, straight away, it was just like no time. He just imbued into me laugh. Like, what a you're so funny to say that. He just delighted in me, and I was embarrassed, of course. But we are children of God, and I'm not ashamed to go back there because it's in obedience to him that I'm telling everybody. So I looked into his eyes, and his eyes they were like, just draw you in. They were just like another world. They drew you right in. And they were like a diamond. They were like diamonds. They really were. But I just remember being drawn into one of his pupils. And, and I thought, oh, his eyes are green. They're like mine. My first near-death experience, which is what you want to hear all about, I guess, was as a baby in hospital. I got bacterial pneumonia, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I know people say, well, that's really weird, but if you come out of your body, you remember everything that surrounds that happening. It's not like a dream or just an everyday memory. It's an extraordinary thing that happens. So there's kind of an imprint there on your psyche. So yeah, that was my first near-death experience was in Croatia when I was about 2 years old. And I had that bacterial pneumonia. I found it very hard to breathe. My parents took me to the hospital, and I just remember struggling to breathe, and the next thing I knew, I was out of my body. And I just remember briefly just the feeling after feeling so oppressed and suffocating, that release that I felt was extraordinary. So that was the first experience. And then the second was while I was at school. And the first thing I did when I became a mother was to teach my son how to swim. Because in Australia, the seas are very rough, it's very much a swimmer. Everyone swims. It's just something that you do. And a lot of tourists are taken by rips and whatnot because they don't calculate that it's actually not a sea that we're surrounded by, it's an ocean. So I was taken by a rip during a school excursion. We were just wading. I think we were about waist deep when, this rip took my feet from under me. And basically, I was tossed around like in a washing machine. I couldn't see. I didn't know what was up and what was down until I was quite far out deep, and I thudded to the floor of the ocean. And I just remember feeling, well, I couldn't breathe anymore. I'd lost my breath. And I just remember feeling this presence and this voice. It wasn't a physical presence, the voice had a presence. If that it's difficult to describe.
So this is when you were 11 years old?
No, this is when I was 6 or 7. About, yeah, 6 or 7 years old. Um, I don't remember exactly, but I remember exactly what happened. In those days, it's actually the beach that we were taken to is not known for being dangerous at all. It was just one of those freak occurrences. And in those days, things weren't run with, so safety conscious. It was a much freer time. We did go on excursions and diving down in caves and things like that, 60-foot ladders and as children and going to the beach. This was just something that was normal for that time. Yeah, so I thudded to the floor and was completely out of breath. And the next thing I knew, I was imbued with a voice, and suddenly I didn't feel the sensation or the desperation of being out of breath anymore. And I just heard this voice say, open your eyes. And I immediately recognized this voice. It was so familiar. And I just said I can't open my eyes, because previously I'd opened my eyes and it was just like being in a whirlpool. I couldn't see a thing and my eyes were felt scratched, and the voice just insisted again, open your eyes. And so I opened my eyes and suddenly I was aware of everything being calm. I just felt very safe, and it was a male voice, so I say he, but this force just buoyed me up from the bottom of the ocean floor. I was suddenly just pushed up to the top of the water. And not only that, but I was completely calm. I had none of the desperation that a drowning person has. So I calmly bobbed up out of the water and waved. We were instructed before we were, set free, what to do in case we got into trouble in the water. And so I did just that. I would just bobbed up and waved, bobbed down, bobbed up again and waved. And soon enough, a teacher came, swam out and took me back in. I wasn't struggling at all. For air, I was just completely calm. Just
So you had to push yourself from the bottom of the ocean and then
no,
wave, or there was.
I didn't
Okay,
push myself. I was
okay,
pushed.
okay.
Yeah, I was pushed up. I didn't push myself. Something buoyed me up. When I opened my eyes underwater, everything was really calm and I could see more clearly than I'd ever seen. And I looked up. As soon as I looked up, I was buoyed up. It was like, when you're diving and you look down and then you travel down. Well, I looked up and I was just buoyed up. So that was really incredible. And I was very calm. I didn't struggle with the teacher at all. But once I was back on the shore, I was just coughing. I just coughed out a lot of water, vomiting and coughing, and I was very embarrassed in front of my friends. So anyway, took me home. They were mortified. They were afraid. Um, and I just had the feeling that, there could be trouble around this, so I didn't really talk about it. My parent, they told my parents, obviously. But yeah, they one of the teachers drove me straight home in his car, and I recovered without consequence. No, I was a little bit sick for a while, but there was no, lingering side effect, or it was just something that happened. Now, I didn't really know what to do with that, or to tell anyone. And it was a time when children were to be seen and not heard. So, yeah, my parents were immigrants. There was a lot of pressure on them. You know, yeah, I just didn't tell anyone until in 2015, I had the most recent near-death experience, which sort of released everything and confirmed to me that it was real. Up until then, I had just pushed it away and thought it was imagination, or well, with my 11-year-old experience, they said it was confabulation from the head injury I suffered. So for 45 years, I didn't believe that it had happened to me. I knew that it happened, but I knew that I couldn't talk about it. So now I help people to integrate their own near-death experiences, and I help people to get over any fear they have of dying because of their religious doctrine. Religiosity sometimes causes a big phobia around dying. Secularism, I guess, sort of just ignores the fact that it's going to happen, and it pretends it offers us all these options against dying, but it happens to everybody. And so that's the area I work in. And I changed directions, as I said, after my 2015 experience. I'm going to go into that one before I tell you about my 11-year-old experience, if that's all right. Because really, with this experience, it confirmed everything. It wasn't the imagination of a child anymore. Now I was an adult, and there was Google. So I could suddenly look things up and find, that way I found the language for near-death experience, the terminology for near-death experiences, and other people testifying. So yeah, it was due to an injury I suffered from a blunt force trauma to my stomach, and it was quite a violent injury, and it caused an ovarian torsion, which caused this slow bleeding to happen inside my abdomen. And by the time the symptoms became really severe, and I was bundled into emergency surgery, quite a time had elapsed. So yeah, it was quite a mess, and it was a dire situation. This had affected all of my organs, and so I found myself on the surgeon's table. I was filled with bitterness after this assault that I'd suffered, and unforgiveness, and I was just crazy angry at the person who did this to me. Yeah, so I died on the operating table, and I didn't realise I was dead, of course. I didn't realise I'd died. I thought that I was being pulled by these nurses to move me onto another table. I just felt being pulled. And I thought, that's strange. I'm, having had surgery that had never happened to me before. And as I looked at them, they were on my right side, 3 nurses. As I looked at them, they were saying, come on, come with us. And as I said, my presumption was that they were moving me from the operating table onto a bed or gurney. And as I realised that they were actually wanting me to sit up, I looked down and I thought, well, this doesn't make sense, because my abdomen was, I was having a huge surgery. I couldn't sit up before the surgery. I certainly couldn't sit up, after such an operation. And I just said, I looked, and suddenly I saw that I had that particular point of view that you have during a near-death experience, and it's unforgettable. So I hadn't experienced that kind of perspective, which is macro and micro. You can see things very close up, and things can be very, very far away from you. And you can see that. You can see over objects and under. It's quite an extraordinary scope of vision that you have when you're in that state of being, that spiritual state of being. So I noticed that there were surgeons scurrying at the foot of my bed, and I thought, "Oh, that's weird." But they actually seemed quite far away. So I looked at them again, and they were getting angry because I was not complying with what they wanted. And so, they sort of turned grey. I noticed that my perception realised that they were grey. I don't know that they actually really changed colour. I think my perception just had the expectation or presumption that they were nurses. But actually, when I realised I was having a near-death experience, I noticed they were a different colour to ordinary. And I used to say negative entities, but I would say that they were demonic beings. It was quite traumatic to be pulled by them. And but really what happened afterwards kind of cured and lifted all of the trauma, because as soon as I realised that something wasn't right and I was not alive, that I was dead, I just said, I'm not going with you. I'm waiting for Jesus Christ. And as soon as I said that, I don't know if they released me, but I was just back in the blackness of the anesthesia. Now, again, it's very, very strange, because when you're in that state of consciousness, you can be the size of a pin, you know, the very, just a point of consciousness, or you can have a body, or you can be expansive. It's it's well, it's 4D. You're experiencing the 5D, I should say. You're experiencing a dimension beyond the restrictions of this gravitational pull. So anyway, when I woke up from the operation in recovery with real nurses, it was just, I had that feeling of complete peace, which I'd experienced during all three of my childhood near-death experiences. And that was when I knew all of it was real, that was when I knew. And immediately I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and I could see people as Jesus had shown me he sees us during my 11-year-old experience. He showed me in my book of life during my life review. He showed me how he sees his people, his beloved is what he calls us. So he showed me that, and it's just, there's something about it. It's like you can see people's spiritual light. It's that way of seeing them. It's just a loving kind of seeing. And so as soon as I opened my eyes, I was just filled with love for everybody. And, I would just, if people glowed with beauty, I would just say it without any kind of, self-consciousness or anything. I was just very aware of how beautiful people were. And I call this a state of grace. I've never studied Christian mysticism, but the more that I'm studying, learning, I understand that this is a state of grace that mystics have experienced before me, long before me. So I was in that state for a whole year. And but when I came home and I could eventually, because it was a huge operation, um, and I could eventually sit up for myself, I started researching and I found some testimonies, and I realized that my meeting with Jesus, as I said during that meeting, that it was really real. So I'll go on without further ado. Um, so I was 11, and we were in the Mount Macedon Ranges in Victoria, which is a southeastern state of Australia. And we were children, was running down a hill and trying to keep up with everybody, and the impetus sort of took over, and I lost my footing. I tripped. My foot caught on a rock, and everything was in slow motion at that point because I knew I was going so fast that I knew that I would fall on my face. So I flung myself back. I didn't want to embarrass myself. And I hit my head on a rock, apparently. And when I fell back, I was expecting to feel being struck, the fall, and I didn't feel anything at all. I didn't feel the fall. I didn't feel my head hit the ground. And I just thought to myself, well, how strange. This is weird. And I felt like I opened my eyes, but I was just in darkness. And I thought, wow, this doesn't make sense. I was very much conscious. So the next thing I knew, as soon as it's like that in that realm, that as soon as you have a thought, the answer comes, a shift occurs. Um, and so, suddenly I was out of my body and just traveling upwards. I was facing the clouds initially, and then I could see everywhere. I could see the whole ranges, and it was just it was just magnificent. I was never a child that dreamt of flying. I never had that kind of um, free spirit. I was always very grounded, pragmatic kind of child. And so it was just bliss. And I say this because I think it's important. Whereas my state during my 2015 encounter with demons was quite bitter, I was in the state of a child. Um, I was feeling, as I moved away from my body, I was just so aware that I had no encumbrance. There was no anxiety. There was no forward thinking, backward thinking. I was just in the moment and very light and blissful. I was definitely being drawn up, and this bliss was, it was wonderful. It was just, like in a dream, but but real. So I suddenly though I hit this bank of clouds. I knew that it was later when I came out of it. I realized it was clouds, but suddenly I hit this atmosphere which was really high up, and it was really, really cold. And at that point, I felt trepidation because I was in the whiteout of the clouds. And when I came above the clouds, I was suddenly aware that space, that the atmosphere ended, that there was blackness suddenly. Now, I didn't see the sun or anything like that, which is really strange, but I didn't. And as soon as I thought, I thought, am I going to be floating around in space? I just thought to myself, actually, I thought of this old series that was running. It was an old American series called Lost in Space. And I thought, am I going to be lost in space? This is my childish way of thinking. Anyway, as soon as I thought that, this black tunnel wormhole just was above my head and just vacuumed me into it. Now, I went very, very fast in this tunnel, and the stars were streaming by, just like in when you see the Matrix movie and all of that coming, that streaming by, that light, but it was just white light. And then I kind of was apprehensive about what was going to happen then. And I looked up and saw that there was a light, a pinprick of light. So at that point, there was some kind of comfort, or this comfort came over me because the light rained in. Again, as soon as I saw something, I was there. Or as soon as I asked something, it was answered. I can't reiterate that enough because, in this life we have so many questions, but over there it's all about answers. So anyway, I soon enough found myself in this light, and I consider that it was the light of God. It was just, well, I know it was. I know it was. Because it was a love that was just, beyond human comprehension, really. So, yeah, I was in this light and it had so many qualities. It had a texture, it had a taste, it was visual, it was orderly, and it spoke to me. I asked, what's life about? That was something I asked, and it just gave me all of these answers, but I didn't come back with all of them except for a couple. Yeah, it was incredible. And I feel like now, as I've unpacked the experience, I feel like while I was in that light, that I was reconstituted in some way. Um, when I came out of the light, out of God's light, I saw these faces looking down. I was so free in this light. It was just, yeah, extremely. If I was free before, I was even freer now. It was extraordinary to be so loved. So I looked around, and as soon as I saw these people, I went down to them. I don't know if I was meant to or allowed to, but I just did. I just came down to these faces that were smiling up at me. Yeah, they welcomed me. I believe that they were ancestors. Um, I think that this was, it's not so clear the memory of them because of what happened next when I took them in and I took in the environment where I was. Um, and yeah, I took in the environment. I was out in front of this huge wall and this big, big gate. It was an arched gate door. It looked ancient. People have said that their heaven experience was diamonds and gold and gems. I didn't have that. That wasn't what I saw. I was actually outside of the gate. But then when I was at the wall, but then when I saw the wall, I could actually see over the wall. And over the wall, I could just see children playing. And suddenly I was close to I could hear the children. I could just feel their joy. It was, it was just, it was just joy like I'd never heard children's joy. It was incredible. thought, wow, what an incredible place this is. What a place. It was just the atmosphere of heaven. It wasn't diamonds and gold. It was the atmosphere and the colours and the freedom and the love. It was just beautiful. So yeah, I saw these children. I saw flowers and rolling hills, and I looked up at the sky, how blue it was, and then I saw what I thought was the sun, but soon enough it started travelling towards me. And when I realised it was travelling towards me, I saw that it had a white centre and it had a halo around it, but it was mercurial in a plasma way. I know it sounds difficult, but yeah, it was not any kind of material or light that we see here. It was at once solid but not solid. It's difficult to explain. So yeah, I saw this light and it came very close to me, and out of this light stepped a man in a robe, a white robe with long hair. And I was just, in awe as soon as I saw him. He had, it's not, you don't have to think, who is this? You just know as soon as you see, as soon as I saw him. And before that, I was a Roman Catholic. For me, Jesus was represented as a suffering, so I hadn't really, I knew that there was God, but I hadn't known Jesus to look like he looked. I just equated him with suffering and guilt, and Jesus is pure and perfect, and you are not, and you are bad, and you're a sinner, and you're going to purgatory at the best and hell at the worst. And that was, I didn't expect to see a man who was so full of power and love, not a humiliated figure, or an angry person. So I just, as soon as I saw him within myself, I just thought, is that Jesus? He's really real. He's really real. And when I said that in myself, straight away, it was just like no time. He just imbued into me laugh. Like, what a you're so funny to say that. He just delighted in me, and I was embarrassed, of course. But yeah, that was the first thing that I said was, he's really real. And the first thing he did was look at me like, you cheeky girl, and then he laughed at me. He laughed not at me, in delight, he delighted in me. And yeah, I had no fear being with him. There's just no fear. And the Bible says perfect love casts out fear. And it is so, he is perfect love. So he welcomed, it was just this embrace. Now, I can't tell you whether I really, the physical hug, but the spirit, the energy embrace was huge. And then he called me by a name. Now, it wasn't my name, but it was a name he had for me. Yeah. So, and he spoke Aramaic to me. I now know it was Aramaic. I was surprised at how soft the language was, It didn't have that kind of inflection, that throaty inflection. It was a very soft language. And I'll never forget the quality of it and him speaking it to me. And I understood. I understood everything he said. And he told me in that language that I was a part of his story. Now, I thought, that can't be possible because I was very aware of what a silly child I was. In His Majesty, I was just like, what? I was not an I was quite a shy child, and I was kind of awkward. Pretty awkward at that age, and not very comfortable in my own skin. I couldn't imagine what he was showing me, but he told me, and he kind of showed me that I would be part of his story, but he didn't reveal all of the details right then. So when he told me that, and I felt so unworthy, I just fell to his feet straight away. It was just there was no hesitation about what to do. There was no awkward. It was just like, bang, I was at his feet. And while I was at his feet, I just cried a lot. I cried a lot. It was really extraordinary. And often I meditate on aspects of my near-death experience, and often I meditate and just want to be just at his feet. I know that might sound quite strange to people. So when I looked up from his feet, I saw a hole. Well, it was just a golden light that shone through the top of his foot. And then I realized that that light was shining where there was a hole from the crucifixion. And then I realized not only that Jesus was real, but the crucifixion was real. Now, the way he was, the crucifixion was so far from my mind at that point, because he was so full of glory. And but yeah, as soon as I saw that and realized that the crucifixion was real, I was immediately at a flagstone, like the big paver, and it seemed to be a narrow, dark. There wasn't any sun in this alleyway, and he was standing completely humiliated, stripped naked, flesh hung from him. And there were these Roman soldiers ridiculing him, taunting him. And I just said, because I had the awareness that I was still with him, that I was seeing this. And so I just said straight away, because it was just, it was suffering like you can't, it's beyond. I've seen The Passion of the Christ, and they did quite a good job, but no, it's not even close. Really, it was so, yeah. But I say, even that has set me free, because when I meditate on that, if I'm having a hard time and I think about that, and then I think about the glory, after seeing that scene, and I asked him, does it still hurt? And he said, no. And when he spoke no, I was just in his glory light. I didn't know if that happened because of my compassion and, um, my empathy, for him. But I was just in glory light. I couldn't see anything. It was just like being in the clouds, but in golden light this time. And as that came out of that golden foggy light, we were above. I was flying. This time. I wasn't being drawn. I was flying with Jesus. Now, I realized at this stage I was a point of consciousness. because I forgot to tell you that when he told me that about, um, being, when he called me that name, I looked down and I had a body. I was wearing a white dress. And, but now when we were flying, I was just a point of consciousness. With him, he was taking me over this moonscape. And now I see that it was Jordan, that we'd flown in to Jerusalem over Jordan. Um, it was just an incredible landscape, an incredible different light to anything I'd ever seen. And we flew in over this walled city, Jerusalem. and, and it was quite a narrow courtyard that I found that he'd brought me to. And we were over these people who were just baying. They were filled with hatred. And you have to understand, this is it was very accentuated in his presence, what hatred is, so much so that it actually had, like, just like being in God's light and love had a quality, this on your senses, this hatred has a quality that's stinks. It's got an acrid, in the spiritual realm, it's got an acrid smell. It's repulsive. And being a child, I felt protective over Jesus, because here I was with him, so pure, and I just hated them. I just was so angry at them and hated them. And he just said, "No, don't hate them." He immediately corrected me, and it didn't make sense to me. I just thought, but I wasn't going to argue. I obeyed immediately. But, he reprimanded me. And then he took me. There was this woman standing above them. There was like a ledge against a wall, and then there were these people down below. And she was very alone. I wouldn't, as he put me there, I didn't imagine that it was his mother, because I had I had pictures of Mother Mary that didn't correspond with how this woman looked. This woman was Palestinian looking, like we see Palestinian women. She had a long face, almond coloured eyes, dark skin. She was lined, I could tell that as soon as aspects of her, I could recognize aspects. I knew she's worked in the sun. And as soon as I knew she'd worked, I saw her at a wishbone plough. I looked at her robes she had, and it was amazing because she had this linen scarf that just rested on her head. And I thought, how is that just staying there? Because there was wind, and I couldn't see any clips or anything. I still don't know how it was. But her hair, like, she had very black hair. And I really think that they used henna in those days, because, or perhaps that people didn't grey as quickly, but the blackness of her hair didn't make sense to me, compared to how older she looked. And and I saw the weave of her robe. It was a herringbone weave, and I thought, wow, my mother was always a fashionista and a seamstress, and so we were always around fabrics and things like that. So this is something that really struck me. Yeah, but more than that, I could feel what she was feeling. I could feel her sorrow, and I could feel how she contained herself, her dignity, and just her love for him, her love, and his love for her. So he showed me that, and I know now why he showed me, because I was to become a mother, and I was to see my son suffer some things that weren't of his doing, um, as mothers do, and you can't do anything about it. So, there's everything that he showed me was for a reason and a purpose. So anyway, then he brought me back to him, back to that place where, well, my consciousness came back to that place where we were together outside of heaven. And and then he told me that he died. I think I must have said, it doesn't make sense to me, I don't understand. And he said, I died to save the whole world. And I said, the whole world? The whole world doesn't believe in you. The whole world doesn't believe in you. They don't know you. They don't know you're real. And he said, yes, the whole world. And later on, he showed me that they would know. Um, but yeah, then he told me to, he asked me to come and sit with him. And we sat on a big rock. Well, it must have been an asteroid. But yeah, to me, it was just like a big, flat, black rock. So it must have been an asteroid. And we sat there and it was very intimate at that point, you know. It was very much like a father and a friend. And we sat very close, and I saw my knees next to his knees, and my feet dangled over the edge of this rock into space, and below there was just this magnificent nebula. And I knew then, at that point, and I haven't told a lot of people because sometimes people are a bit greedy to know some things, you know. And this retelling is quite vulnerable because it does put me back in that childish state. But we are children of God, and I'm not ashamed to go back there because it's in obedience to Him that I'm telling everybody. So I looked into his eyes, and his eyes they were like, just draw you in. They were just like another world. They drew you right in. And they were like a diamond. They were like diamonds. They really were. But I just remember being drawn into one of his pupils. And, you know, and I thought, oh, his eyes are green. They're like mine, you know. I think before I probably didn't allow myself to look into his eyes until we were sitting there together. Anyway, so you know, I looked and they were grey, and they like had a blue rim, and then they were quite greeny grey. And then to the centre there were just these, you know, shards, like in a diamond, like a diamond cut. There was just like a gold and brown, and, you know, just at the pupil, the iris. And yeah, so I knew then I don't want to, I never want to leave you. And I sort of was I just want to stay with you. I just want to stay here forever. And as soon as I thought and felt that, he said, look here, my child. And he put his right hand in front of us, and just there was stardust in his hand as he swept it across. And this book appeared, and it kind of it looked like it was on the stand, but it was just floating there. And this book opened, and the first page said, I now allow myself to to accept that it actually said beloved on the first page. Again, you have to understand that, you know, tied up with this is a lot of that guilt and shame that that superego that we're educated in, that we were educated in during religious education, as in my denomination. So I think that's that's the case across the board. I think with most Christian denominations, they're very guilt heavy, you know. So yes, I accept. It said beloved on the first page. And you know, it's strange because there's a dichotomy that at the same time you're very conscious of his purity and majesty, and you're very conscious of being loved, that you are not nothing, that you are somebody and something, that you are so loved by him. But you're also, you're conscious of not being a god. You're conscious of, you're conscious of being more than you think you are, but less than you think you are at the same time. So it's quite an eye-opening, mind-opening. But so this book that was in front of us just started flicking, and it was like a movie that flicks, those old flickering movies. And it was like a slide by slide, but it was going very, very fast. And I got involved in the story unfolding. I could see it was a family. They were welcoming this child. And it was just the loving scenes of this family, none of the difficult scenes. It was just the loving scenes. And I was so involved with the perspective of every character in this story that I didn't realize it was my life review at all until this scene came up where I argued with a friend. She'd said something that hurt my ego. And so I insulted her mother. I can't remember what it was that she said, and that was not the point of the story. The whole point of that book was me and my, my accountability in life. It was my life review about how so I said, I was mortally, my ego was wounded from seeing this because I knew immediately that it was wrong, that I'd done the wrong thing. And so I was embarrassed at having, at once being seen as beloved and then also seeing this hurtful thing that I'd said to a friend, a very beautiful friend. Yeah, and I've put together, here he was showing me people that hated him and he was telling me not to hate them. And here I was with no patience for a friend. But of course, I didn't understand that as a child. And I said to him, but you don't know, she said she provoked me to that. It was, if I can't defend myself, how can I live in this life? Because I knew already that he was going to send me back. As soon as I saw that, I knew I had unfinished business. So I said, it's not fair, it's not fair. And I said, you don't understand. And he laughed when I said, you don't understand. He just, and when he laughs, it just fills you with joy. His joy is transferred to you immediately. And so he laughed. And I thought, I don't understand. I don't know how to be in the world if I can't defend myself. And he said, your life will be as according to your focus. What you focus, it was kind of put to me that it was just like a magnifying glass, that can start a fire. That was the kind of imagery that I remember, that it was our focus is like a magnifying glass and it can create. And so immediately in my childish mind, I thought, I'm going to be rich. All right, if I go back, I'm going to focus on a house on the beach and being rich and having because we were all equally poor during the 70s. So yeah, that was my childish thinking at that point. And he knew what I was thinking. He didn't correct me at all. And he, yeah. And then I thought that for a moment, and then I said, yeah, but I still don't want to go back. Like, even if I have that, I still don't want to go back. And he said, look here. And then he showed me this young man. And at age 11, I was already, we kind of grew up quite quickly. As you told me earlier, your mother married very young. My mother married at 17 and had me at 19. And, I guess as migrant children, we were kind of looking to very quickly, pair up and looking forward to being married and all of that. It was all about that. And so when he showed me this young man, I immediately thought, oh, he's showing me what's going to be in this future, what's coming in my future. I knew that he was showing me that. And I said, is this going to be my husband? Because this young man, he looked at me with the kind of love that a wholesome 11-year-old appreciates. It was just the innocent acceptance, it was just a full love and it was a knowing love, And so I thought, oh, this is going to be my husband. But I still didn't want to go. I still didn't want to go back. And it was so important to hear my free will that I decide to go back. I said, I don't want to, I still don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to a world that doesn't know you. They don't know you like I know you now. They don't know. And then he showed me scenes of people worshipping him out in the open, every kind of person. It was just, this and now I know it's the Holy Spirit we're in revival now, I know. And he showed me, all these people, especially a lot of young people. And of course, back in 1977, religion was not a young person's sport. It was not a preoccupation of young people because it was very dry. But here were young people worshipping with all their hearts, singing and praising and, just completely overtaken with the Holy Spirit. And I thought, they do know, they are knowing you. And then he showed me a scene of me talking to a lot of people as a grown woman. And I thought, wow, that's huge. That was something beyond my imagination. And I said, so do you want me to tell everybody? And he said, yes. But I could see it wasn't immediately. I could see that wasn't the main thing that he wanted for me. So I said to him, he showed me then when he said yes, but I wasn't going to be the main um, the main player in this new wave of near-death experience testimonies. He showed me a man with earphones on, and I knew that he was being seen, but I didn't understand because it didn't look like television. I thought it was a radio, but it was a radio that could go everywhere. That was what I thought when I saw it. So anyway, he showed me a certain person who's now also doing as you do and broadcasting experiences, and he's also had an experience, Randy Kay. He showed him to me. He showed me a lot of things so that I could, when I came back and finally accepted my NDE, I could research. I could see the nebulas, because back in 1977 there were no nebulas when this occurred. We didn't see nebulas. There was no worshipping Christ like we're seeing now with this revival happening in China, in Africa, in everywhere, in the States, in Australia. There was no worship outside of churches. So, so many things he showed me so that I could verify, so that I would have the courage to obey his calling to me when it was time. And he called me to testify just before the big lockdown. Isn't that interesting? Just before COVID started to be a big deal for everybody, when it was just a blip, he called me to he insisted I testify. I couldn't sleep at night. I knew I had to do it. So then he also told me, I'm coming. He didn't show me, but he told me everyone will see me like you see me. Everyone will know I'm coming back. The earth will see me. Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff. So it was not a surprise to me that when he sent me back, I finally agreed because he looked very sad because for a moment I said, well, this looks like a wonderful life. And he looked sad. And I thought, no, okay, I'll go back and I'll make sure that you're not sad over my life. So I agreed. And as soon as I agreed, he pushed me. He pushed me on my shoulders and I fell back into the blackness. I, yeah, I came around. My mother was, I was apparently no colour to me whatsoever. I was completely grey and gone. And I had this brain fluid coming out of my ear. I had total amnesia. I didn't recognise any of my family. And they bundled me up and took me to a doctor. But as soon as I could talk, I said, and here I could, I remember my mum saying, oh, her colour's coming back. And there's just so much the memory there. But I couldn't remember anybody. Yeah, so they bundled me up and took me to the nearest town because we were out in a um, in a out country, country way, not near any amenities. But they took me to the nearest town and the nearest doctor, and I had by then told them as soon as I could talk, Jesus is real, Jesus is real, He's real. I've just been with Jesus, and now of course they remember. My mother remembers me saying that. It was 45 years ago, and she remembers. She remembers everything. And once we were at the doctor, they said, tell the doctor. So I told the doctor, and the doctor was very quiet. And then he turned away from me, and I felt I felt his disgust at me, actually. As a child, I felt it. And I knew he didn't believe me. He just said to my parents, this is the result of right temporal lobe brain injury, and it's called confabulation, which I immediately understood meant a lie or something you make up. Or so, yeah, that was about it. They tell you the bleeding had stopped, or the fluid had stopped out of my ear. Um, he told them just not to let me rest and gave them instructions, not to let me fall asleep, and gave them instructions about how to treat me and in which case to take me to the emergency room. So basically, my parents headed home then, and I knew that I wasn't to speak of it again. No one believed me. Um, and so for 45 years, I didn't. Until that time, I sat at the computer and looked up nebula, looked up, um, looked up what happens when you die. Just started searching and finally integrated. And I subsequently became a counsellor, as I mentioned, and I help people to integrate, because life is so different once you integrate a spiritual experience like that. And life is so free when you don't fear death. Yeah, if you're in Christ, you really have nothing to fear. He is a forgiving God. He is a gentle and loving God. But there are some things which are repulsive to, you know, they're just, that's what I remember. That's what I know. That's why he showed me those people, and so I could experience that it was repulsive. And so, and also my encounter with demons, demons are real. So, but Jesus is realer. I think Jesus is really real.
Well, Pauline, that was an amazing story. I made so many notes here, but I didn't want to interrupt you because you were just inspired to tell it, and you were just told it beautifully. And I have a ton of questions. And by the way, about demons, you said right now in 2015,
Mm.
you said, I'm waiting for Jesus, go away. So there was the power of choice. Again,
Yes.
you made a choice to
Yeah.
choose Jesus,
Yes.
right? And right away it materialized.
Straight away, I was in blackness like that. And when I woke up, I was 100% sure that this was a near death experience. And then when I went to the hospital for a follow up, and I had some complaints, and he said, "You're lucky you're alive." I said, "I know." And we both knew, but we didn't, I'm sure that I could get the hospital records, but he said, you are very lucky to be alive. These little problems that you're having are nothing. And I had to have a second surgery, but yeah, I woke up, Serge, and it's Sergey? It's Sergey, isn't it?
Sergey, it's fine, yeah.
Sergey, sorry.
Yeah.
I woke up and was on dialysis and all of these machines, and in a bad way. But I had 5 incisions in my abdomen and a huge scar, and the surgery was 4.5 hours long. So I was not in good shape, but I was filled. He gave me grace because I chose him. He filled me with grace.
I want to come back to the 11 years old, when you were 11 years old. Most of my notes are about that near death experience. You see, when you came back and the doctor was discussed, did that behavior of the doctor, did it make you doubt your experience or not?
Um, it didn't immediately. It didn't make me doubt my experience. Uh, it did eventually. As
Okay.
time went on, and as I knew I couldn't say it, but I knew that I was different and I couldn't do some things that I used to be able to do. Like, I couldn't gossip about people. It just caused a shift in me, which had a social impact because, um, groups gossip, they bond over what they dislike or what they wish to reject. That's a point of bonding. So, yeah, there were, although I didn't dwell on it or anything, I just really, I couldn't do, I was changed forever, it had changed me.
So how many years it took you before you started really talking about it?
45 years.
45 years.
Yeah.
So you decided to talk about this like recently, a couple years ago when.
Yes. Um, I knew that I had to, after the operation and everything, um, realizing that Jesus was real and looking back on everything, I knew that I had to talk about it. There was another experience I had after that, while in that state of grace, where a nurse also recognized that I was in that state of grace, filled with the Holy Spirit. And when you're filled with the Holy Spirit, you listen. you know, what we've been told is our conscience is often the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit doesn't condemn us, but it convicts us. And it never puts us down, but it instructs us. It's always our choice whether to listen or not. And it's difficult for people to trust. For me, it's not so difficult anymore. But yeah, you become sensitive to God's voice, and so you have to obey, whether you want to or not. And this has been life-changing, coming out with a testimony. It's no longer my career that's important. It's, you know,
So did you have to write a book about this?
Sergey, I haven't. written a book. I've wanted as many people to freely hear about my experience as possible. That's why I accept every invitation, almost every invitation, um, because I don't want anyone to say, I know what a story it is, and I don't want anyone to say that, this is just to make money on a book. I know that I have to write the book, and I know the time is coming. It's very close now. But I just want as many people to hear about it.
Right. So, why do you think Jesus sent you back?
Um, well, apart from obeying him, for my son. Yeah. He, he, yeah, for my son. It was for my son because when my son was born, I didn't have a name for him yet, but God gave him. God, yeah, again, the Holy Spirit just said, Jacob, it's Yaakov. So, and at that stage, I hadn't integrated, my near-death experience it was not on my, it was not a part of my life. I wasn't a Bible reader. I wasn't a church goer. None of that. But when you hear God's voice, you know, because it's coming outside of you and you just, um, yeah. So I know it was for him. And um, the thing is, we who believe in him are chosen people. It's not that I'm chosen and my Yaakov is chosen, my Jacob is chosen. It's each one of us. He is like a diamond that reaches each one of his children. That's just like a light refracts. There is no time is not like it is in 3D over there. And one person can be in the future and in the past, it's it's so very difficult to understand, but he can be with each person.
You mentioned the movie Matrix. I'm thinking maybe the director of this movie had an NDE and never told anybody, just wrote a screenplay about it.
Yeah. I thought that too when I watched it.
Because that's such a profound information there.
Yeah. And that is it. It is profound. Although I found that The Matrix was quite an intellectual film. Um, but there's something about being over there there's a very emotional quality, and our emotions are key. There's a key, our emotions hold a key to our freedom.
Right. This is a question I was going to ask you about freedom because my show is called About Freedom Show. So, what's your definition of freedom?
If you'd asked me that, in 2000 and even in 2017, I wouldn't have the answer that I'm giving you now, because through integrating my NDE and supporting others, I can see that freedom is really letting go and letting God. Freedom is not holding on so tightly and trusting God. You know, um, I experienced that freedom of leaving my body, and freedom is shedding your anxiety. Freedom is just being in the moment, being in the joy of God. Um, allowing joy. I think there's that line in the Bible, um, about sufficient to the day are the troubles therein. So whatever is in front of you, right in front of you, that's enough for you to ponder, that's enough for you to deal with. So that's a kind of freedom too.
I noticed something when you say something profound. I want to think about this. I looked up, and probably it's not only me. A
No,
lot of people do that. They look aside. What do you think is that? Why we look up when we ponder on something? We're looking for an answer, and we look up right away. Right? We don't look down.
because it's not inside of ourselves, we look down, or if we're thinking, we look to the right. if we're looking for words or we're thinking something up.
Yeah, but we're looking still up a little bit,
But when
right
we're
and up.
looking, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
but when we're looking up, we're drawing from from conscious,
right.
our our connection to God, our conscious connection.
Yeah.
Um, it's something that once you accept that God is real, that's something that that grows, and you see it ever more. It's just something that expands. And um, I found that a good way of growing it is just noticing God in little things, like gratitude.
Yeah, God is in details. That's what I say.
Yes, yeah, and nothing is coincidence. I even look nowadays for traffic jams or annoyances. It's just like, oh, here's another opportunity to flex my spiritual muscle at being not being drawn into this energy of this slavery to bitterness and anger, because um, it's consuming. If you see all of the programming, TV programming, it's all designed to consume you in fear.
Then they can control you. If you're afraid, you can
Exactly.
be controlled
Yes. Yes.
because they're gonna give you the answer. They're gonna say, "We're gonna save you if you do this."
Yes. Yeah. Just like,
Yeah, the religion took the same kind of approach. We're gonna save you if you do this.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I recently, because I love to worship, I love to worship Jesus. And so I've worked with Teen Challenge, and that's a Christian rehab organization for people who have problems with addiction. And as part of their recovery, they read the Bible and draw closer to God and Jesus. And they go to different churches. And so I became used to just going to different churches to worship. And I noticed that, some churches just demand it, they guilt you into tithing, and that's not even biblical. You know, Jesus told us to feed the hungry, to love one another. These are the things. He didn't tell us to get rich, that, oh, if you give me 10%, you're going to get so much more back in return, like this prosperity gospel. Or, you know, or to be controlled by guilt that, you are a dirty sinner. Um, no, he just wants us to choose him because he is love. He wants us to choose him. We, as human beings, going
The
through
answer is
puberty,
all about love.
it is. Going through puberty, we don't know what love is. We want to, copulate and pair up, and we've got all those raging hormones going that say reproduce, reproduce. But we don't have the social structure anymore to grow love, which is what God, what Jesus came down to teach us what love is.
So this is what a real Christian is. Like you love Christ right now. Jesus is real. Jesus is real. This is a real Christian. This is the essence of a real Christian, I would say. The way you experience, the way you brought this experience back to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. He wants everybody to know him like that, you know, um, to know his joy because he is joy. And but he's holy as well. He's, yeah. You don't know holy until you experience.
And I like your analogy about the book with a flickering movie.
Yeah.
It looked like a book or it looked like a movie screen when you had the live review.
It was a movie in a book.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a screenplay.
Yes, a screenplay, but in motion picture, in Technicolor.
Okay. Okay. A moving screenplay.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
it,
know?
it was, you know
Yeah,
what, Sergey, it was like those old-fashioned movies, that flicker,
right,
the old
right.
Charlie Chaplin kind of
Yeah, yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but in color, like,
yeah.
yeah,
And bright, beautiful colors that we can't explain here.
yes, yeah,
So I like very much how you said about what you said about focus. Your focus is like a magnifying glass.
mm,
And when you were on the other side, I don't, I'm quoting you probably, maybe I'm wrong, correct me, but you probably focus on something and you're right there
yeah,
immediately.
yeah, yes,
And here on this earth, we have to focus on something. If we are really, really focused all the time, we get there eventually anyway.
yeah,
And this is what Jesus told you. He
yeah,
told you, focus. He says, focus, right?
yes, yeah. Focus and freedom of choice, everything he showed, he didn't correct me. And this is what I mean about, when it's not of God, because God uh, will convict you, which means he'll give you the urge to do something right, but he won't condemn you. So if something is condemning you, you're having voices say you're bad because of this or you're bad, that's not of God. That's not of God. Now, I can't say everyone is going to go to heaven because I know demons are real. And it really is, freedom of choice. But I can say that when you don't fear death because your focus is in the right place, your focus is, and our focus is different as we develop. That's normal. That's why God's given us a long life so that we could get there eventually. But yeah, that's such freedom not to fear death because you have faith in Christ. Your faith, your faith just annihilates your fear. And I've heard people who have not had a near-death experience at all or any, and they've got greater faith than me, much greater faith than me.
Yeah, people meditate, people pray, people fast, people, seclude, they go in the caves, they search for God. Everybody's looking because they have this real desire to connect with the eternal all the
Yes,
time.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. And I think desiring God is probably the best thing that you could do for yourself.
I guess this is why I'm doing this podcast. I started recently, probably 3 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
You are my guest number 8 or guest number 9. I don't remember. But this is a beautiful conversation we had. I've been touched by it, and hopefully my listeners will be touched too. I'm pretty sure that the message will get to the right people. You know how they say, then when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. The same thing with the message. When the person is ready,
Yes,
the message arrives.
absolutely.
Hope this message will touch the people that are ready. And now I would like to ask you if you like to share some information. Where can people reach you, or you have some courses, or
I provide counselling and spiritual life coaching. Um, I, if people have thanatophobia, fear of death, I can help with that. If people feel far from God because they have anxiety over some of the teachings of religion, I can help with that. Um, and if people have had a near-death experience and find it really hard to be on earth after their near-death experience, I can help with that as well. So I'm a trauma therapist, um, as a counsellor, but as a coach, I'm a spiritual life coach. So, um, but of course, my main focus is connecting with Jesus. So I'm not into some of the other alternatives. Yeah, it's I you know it's called integrity.
So, would you like to share the information, or should I just put it in the notes in
You
my
can just put it in the
podcast?
notes. People can look me up
Okay.
with my name.
Okay.
I've got a YouTube channel and I'm going to start posting because I basically just work one-on-one.
Okay.
So my YouTube channel is Grace Calling as one word, and my Facebook page is Pauline Glamochak. So you can look me up on Facebook there. Yeah, so I'd be happy to help anyone. I do have a number of clients in the States, so I have had.
Well, I'll tell you this, in my experience talking to you for over an hour and a half, that only you don't even need to give any advice. Just talking to you is already so soothing.
Oh,
Just listening to your voice,
it's not me.
because
It's
I know
yeah, it's not me.
you are the channel. You are the channel for Jesus.
I still can't abbreviate it. I wish I could tell it much quicker, but I'm not in Earth time when I'm retelling it anymore.
No, that's okay. I know you are. You don't have no time. You see, my clock has been 5 minutes to 6 since we started. It's still there. There's no time in this room.
I like that setup. It's very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for watching About Freedom Show. I really appreciate you. Click on one of the videos below and don't forget to subscribe.